they don't get to do this easily. They don't get to just be comfortable stealing voting rights from Black folks. I'm going to obstruct, and I'm going to make and get into trouble. Like, I am going to make it uncomfortable for you. I'm going to put it back into your face how much of a racist act this is.
Keep that steel in your spine. Keep that steel in your spine. Keep that steel in your spine.
Now you see, I bet folks feel better already.
That was perfect. And I want to thank Chris Matthews. She's been at several of our events over the years and at the Women's Summit featured guest. She just nails it. She forged in fire. I do. And when we talk about praying with your feet, it reminds me of Frederick Douglass when she talks about, is there fire in your feet? You know, so it feels good. So we have a few minutes, and I want to see what's on your mind real quick at the top of maybe some current news or what you want to say before we get things started.
Well, there is some good news. I mean, it depending on how you look at it. So, for example, all of us have been really bothered by that whole slush fund thing. And we
Yes.
found out today that a judge has stopped it. We don't know how far that will go, but it
Right.
is good news that it has been stopped. And I think the other bit of good news that I think about this morning, I was listening to some news, and in Texas even, the data centers that we talk about them all the
Right.
time in Virginia because it's such a big deal.
Right.
But there are people who are really upset in Texas about those data centers. And what's really interesting is that they've done legislation that has really gutted a lot of the safety, a lot of the regulations that would have stopped some of it. They've taken those away. So these centers are popping up everywhere, and people are mad, mad, mad. Which is just another point to say that if you find the right mechanisms, you find the right messages, you find the things that affect people, they are willing to step away and say, this is just a bridge too far. So I think I find good news in that our message today, as well as understanding who we should be talking to and how we should be talking to them, will matter as we try to move forward. That's my good news.
I think when we talk about the corruption, this is key. When we see the White House lawn look like a circus, I know I posted something about it because I don't say that. I hate the word hate. So I posted something about that saying, I really hate the occupants of the White House, what they have done to, just the lawns and taking out all that beauty. And it's like a circus show. And it is the fluff part that we can change later, but it is the really capture the federal level that we've been worried about. So every bit helps. And I think exposure helps. People start to see that these data centers affect their water, their livelihood, their schools, their budget, and then they start to wake up because it's all connected to AI and the corruption, the crypto people. And it's such a corruption, but it's kind of complex for people to see it all at once. So our job is to take it one bit at a time and get people sort of woken up about this. So I'll just say, I'm so glad today everybody is here together. You're on the Friday Power Lunch, and I'm your host, one of your hosts today, Catherine White.
And I'm Fennell Norton.
Yes, and we're here to bring you a great show at the Friday Power Lunch Live that connects Virginia with grassroots across the country, across the nation. We have some California friends here, and I see my friend Peggy Margaret here that I need to talk to later. I see some old friends here. Pat Rainey's back, so thank you for being here. Paula Felt and David Felt, great fans in the room. And people of the show, we have patrons that support us, that we love that they support us. If you want to be a patron, think about joining our community. It really means a lot. We write you a special email, you get a special background, but it really is the kind of support that we need right now. That income coming in every week is really super for what we need to do. So thank you so much for that. And use the chat around. Tell us how you're feeling, if you have some steel in your spine or fire in your pants, because we love when you talk in there. But if you get nasty, we'll boot your butt out. And we're subscribe to our Substack, follow us on YouTube, because we got some great content for now.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Yeah.
I was going to say, for me, the stuff that I write is my opinion about what I'm feeling in the moment. And sometimes it's pretty fiery. Someone probably needs to say, hey, come back up. But most of the time, it's really sort of common sense. And I just think that that's missing in a lot of spaces because we seem to think that it's this really highly intellectual, these folks on the TV, the consultants, but people really want to know what we're feeling,
Yeah.
and what we're thinking in these moments. So if you want to know that, come in and
Follow us on
call us.
something. We got some good stuff to read, and it's always followed with action because hope is rooted in action. But I'm excited about our guest today. We're thrilled to have in the room with Senator Charlane Oliver, Tennessee State Senator, District 19. And Tennessee is dear to our heart for a lot of reasons. We had Afton Bain in here that was on the show, Gloria that ran against Senator Blackburn, boo. And so we love Tennessee. They're very similar to us, like North Carolina. It's feels like a sister state. So thank you, Charlane, for being here. Also, beloved Delegate Sam Rasoul, Virginia House of Delegates in Roanoke. And I'm so glad he's here today because when you say data centers, you talk about education, you talk about really what grassroots activists are feeling. Been with us from the start, been at the Women's Summit, done a lot of leadership content. So we're so glad that he's here today, and we have some great questions. So I'm so glad Mr. Truth, Love, and Grit is here. And then lastly, another love of just reading and just bringing it every year to the Women's Summit and partnering with us. Jen Morrow is here. She's an owner of Bards Bookstore. And if you live in Virginia and you don't have to, you can go right to their website now, put the link in and go see all the wonderful books. Order them through Jen's site. She'll be moving to a new location, but my goodness, what a great woman-owned bookstore in Vienna. And she has stuff online that's great resources. So we're so excited to have her today. And so I am in action and Charlane.
Thank you so much. So I am so happy to have Charlane with us today. And I am going to take a minute because I want you guys to really understand who she is and all the things that she's done. So she is one of the boldest voices who fight for voting rights and racial justice in the South. And she was called to action during the Trayvon Martin. She co-founded the Equity Alliance, and it built Black political power and economic power in Tennessee. And she transformed that effort, launched with $250 of her own money to $250 million. So she's done some really great things. But not only that, she's a strategist, she's an award-winning nonprofit founder, a communications expert, and the current Tennessee state senator. And so, yes, thank you. There you are. So I have been so excited to talk to you. When I was reading about you, the article that I came upon first was in the 19th. And I just thought it was so beautifully written about you and your family. But the first question that I want to ask you today is, how are you doing?
Hi there for now. Thank you all for having me today. It's been, I can't even put into words how I'm doing. Just with the latest, things that have happened to me with the targeting of me on Wednesday. Yesterday was a pretty rough day for me, to be quite honest. All of the things that I'm carrying, but I'm staying encouraged. I am staying encouraged because I know that I am on the right side of history, and we are on the right side of history. So I'm encouraged to be with you all today.
We are too. And, one of the things and I'm going to let you just sort of talk about Tennessee in a minute, but I want to say a little more about you and where you come from. When I was reading about you, your uncle and your grandfather fought in two very important wars. And I'm sure that that must speak to your family in certain ways. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yes, I come from a long lineage of fighters and people of service. And so my great uncle, his name was Elijah Bryant. I discovered this maybe about 5 years ago when I was doing some research, and he fought in the Battle of Fort Smith. He was a former slave, and he enlisted in the Union Army. And he fought in that Battle of Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is where my father's side of my family originated from. And so we have Native American in us. And one of my family members escaped a plantation to Oklahoma and married a Native American. And so that to me, and his gravesite is still in Fort Smith. And so that to me, it gives me a direct personal purpose in this fight. To know that one of my family members fought for my freedom to exist. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Elijah Bryant, and all of the many soldiers, Black soldiers that fought in the Union Army. And then my grandfather, both of my grandfathers fought in World War II. But my dad's dad, Monroe Relford, when I got elected, my dad gifted me with a photo of my grandfather and all of his fellow soldiers. He was part of the last all Negro infantry in the U.S. Navy that fought in the World War II. And my dad, Monroe Relford Sr., he was the only one that could read and write in that infantry. And so one of the things that he was tasked with doing was writing all the letters to the women that were back home. And so I have a photo of him in his infantry, and all of the soldiers signed the back of that photo, and that was gifted to me. And I keep that in my office at the legislature to remind me not only of where I come from, but the fight that I come from. And so this is personal to me. And I get emotional just thinking about it, but this is who I come from, and this is the people that I come from, of fighters, people who fought for us to be here, which is why this voting rights fight is so important, so personal, and so critical to the moment that we're in.
Yeah, and we probably have just the fighter that we're supposed to have fighting this fight right now, which is a pretty hard fight. So let's just talk about that for a minute. And we've got several things that it's going to be really important to get to, because when we were opening the show today, we were chatting in the green room, you were talking about some things that have happened, and we're gonna get to that because that's really important. Just shows how evil they are, but that's another story. But let's talk about where you see this going right now. So this fight in Tennessee, what's next?
You know, Tennessee has always been ground zero for the fight for voting rights and racial justice. And because we are the birthplace, one, of the KKK, we are also the place where Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Tennessee is the place where Rosa Parks and Dr. King trained at the Highlander Center in Monteagle, Tennessee, to prepare for the Montgomery bus boycotts, for the sit-ins. And so this has always been a place of resistance. When you think about Diane Nash, who was a student at Fisk, and Congressman John Lewis, who was a student at American Baptist College, two historically Black colleges that I represent in my district right now, were here in Nashville, marching down Jefferson Street when the bombs went off at Z. Alexander Luby's house, to demand of our mayor to say, do you believe that we deserve rights? And this has always been the birthplace. We have freedom fighters here. And so Tennessee has always been this place of resistance. And I pride myself on being one of the first to lead the new resistance in Tennessee when I co-founded the Equity Alliance. Literally 10 years ago, on November 18, 2026, my life changed forever, because when Donald Trump came down that escalator, a week later, I co-founded the Equity Alliance to say we have to stand in the way. I've been registering voters. I've been a plaintiff in 2 federal lawsuits since then. And I have challenged the Republicans at every step of the way. My organization in 2018 midterms registered 91,000 Black and brown people across the state in 3 months. It was a historical voter registration effort that got us retaliated against then. And in 2019, the Secretary of State came back with a law to retaliate against us, to put financial penalties, making it a Class C felony to register people to vote. And if you make a mistake, could land you in jail and lose your voting rights. So I had to stop that and become a federal plaintiff. And we sued the state and won that lawsuit in federal court. When COVID happened, we sued the state again to ensure that every Tennessean could vote by mail that year, because we had a pandemic, that people didn't want to leave their house. And so here I stand now later in Tennessee, still fighting this voter suppression. And so the fight still continues in the South, is what I need people who are watching this all across the country. The fight is here. If we are going to win in November, if we are going to come out of this fascist regime sitting in the White House and is spreading his hatred across this country, then the fight has to be met in states like Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, North Carolina, and yes, Virginia. So what's next is between now and November 3rd, everyone needs to be pushing everyone to the polls, but also educating people on what the stakes are and why we need to go to the polls. We are in a moment where this could be, and I don't want to be doom and gloom, but we have to be realistic of where we are. That could be one of the last elections that are free and fair in this country. If we don't hold the line, and if we don't secure Congress in the midterms this year, so that we can stop Donald Trump from continuing to spew his hatred from the White House, we have to stop his agenda in November. And so that's what's at stake here. And that's what we're going to be doing in Tennessee, is continuing to amplify what is happening, not only to our constituents being harmed with these congressional maps, but to us as legislators. And
So let me go there. So I want to do two things, because I also want to end when we get done. I want to talk about, what we can do. And I know we have the fight here in Virginia, but we also have to figure out how we put resources in Tennessee too. The thing that I was talking about when we were opening about cracking open fascism is, I do believe in my soul that it has to be about more than gas and groceries, because what's at stake is bigger than gas and groceries. I know it's how we get the attention to people, but we're going to lose something way bigger than the ability to buy gas and groceries. So before we go there, though, this is my question to you. You did everything that you could up to this point, and now you got more to do.
Yeah.
There was something in you when you stood on top of that table, and when you unfurled that sheet that said, no Jim Crow 2.0 and stop the steal. What were you thinking? It was an unexpected moment, which is so important. What were you thinking, and what were you feeling?
Oh my gosh. That's a loaded question that I need some time to answer. But I need to take you back to 2022. In 2022, let me give you some context.
Okay.
Tennessee is not a red state. We are a gerrymandered state. We are a non-voting state. We're 51st, and we rank 51st in voter turnout because of the structural things against us to vote. I represent Nashville. I am the only Black woman and Black person that represents Nashville in the Tennessee Senate. I serve the most diverse Senate district in the entire state. I have the largest Kurdish community in the country in my district, a huge Hispanic population, huge immigrant population, and predominantly African American. So I have to speak for a huge swath of marginalized folks in the Senate. There are only 6 Democrats out of 33 in the Senate. There are 24 in the House out of 99. We're in the super minority. So they could pass maps, they can pass any legislation they want without us even showing up to work. So that's what you need to understand first and foremost. In 2022, Nashville's a Democratic county, and they stole our House seat from us in 2022 and cracked Nashville into 3 congressional districts. So it happened to me first. It happened to my constituents first, right? And they didn't just crack the lines. They specifically drew those lines along Black and brown neighborhoods so that they could dilute the voting power of Nashville, Black Nashvillians in my district. So this was personal to me in my district. And so fast forward to this special session that was called, it was unprecedented, meaning in 1972, Tennessee passed a law that said you cannot do mid-decade redistricting. You just can't do it. You have to do it during the census. So in order to call the special session that Governor Lee did, we had to break the law to do it. So it was an illegal special session, first and foremost. Secondly, they weaponized the gutting of the Voting Rights Act to do this, to say now we must steal a House seat from Memphis, the largest African-American city in Nashville and the blackest city in America. So that is not by accident that they targeted a majority black district. But Memphis was not majority black. The District 9, was not that way because it's majority black. It just happens to be because it's Memphis, and that city, that district was drawn that way. So what was I thinking was, one, they don't get to do this easily. They don't get to just be comfortable stealing voting rights from black folks. I'm going to obstruct, and I'm going to make and get in good trouble. Like, I am going to make it uncomfortable for you. I'm going to put it back into your face how much of a racist act this is. So that was the first thing I'm thinking, is like, what can I do? Because we are in an unprecedented special session. We've never called a special session to specifically redraw maps and dilute voting power from Tennesseans. So in and of itself was an unprecedented moment that I need to signal this is not business as usual of what we're doing. This is not just another day at the office. And so every day in the special session, I thought of what could I do to signal that. On the first day, I talked about my ancestors. I talked about what I talked about, right? And then on the second day, during statements and announcements, I got up and did another speech to say and talk about the history. I said, you need to know your white history. Okay. Mm-hmm. The Memphis Massacre of 1866. And I talked about how Black people were targeted then, and similar to the Tulsa Massacre, and how it has always been a violent attack against Black folks. And then on the third day was when the protest happened. And so I'm just thinking, what more can I do to communicate to my colleagues that what you are doing will have devastating consequences, not just for Black Tennesseans, but for the rest of this state and for your districts. And then what can I do to communicate to the people who are watching and to the people who are disaffected and who have tuned out, mm-hmm. that this is the moment. This is the moment to take a stand. If voting rights and the fight for voting rights is not the thing to stand up for, then what is? I couldn't think of any other moment to where I had to take the ultimate stand. And I'm a person of faith. And so I had my Bible and scriptures going that whole week. I was reading, I was praying, meditating, and I read a scripture, Ephesians 6, verse 10. And it talks about putting on the full armor of God. And at the end of that scripture, it talks about when you've done everything you could, you stand. And so I stood on that desk. I stood for every person who fought for my freedom, for me to be there. I stood for people who don't have a voice in Memphis. And so I needed to show that, like, you just can't do this to us. And so I stood on the desk and I grabbed my blanket and I unfurled it to let them know this is what you're doing. It's no Jim Crow 2.0. This is exactly where you're taking us back to. And then I started singing, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Because if y'all are going to play in our faces and do this to us, I'm going to resist with pride and joy. You are not going to take our dignity away from us. You may strip us from a house seat, but you won't strip our dignity. And so I sang the words of the Black National Anthem. And it talks about, we will march on till victory is won. So you might have won this battle. You might have passed those maps, but you will not win. You will not win in the end. And so that's why I stood up on my desk.
Well, I'm going to tell you, it was iconic, as it should be. But then that just wasn't enough for them. So folks are asking what Virginia can do. And there are two things that Virginia can do. And one of them is to support Tennessee. And you're going to tell us how to do that. And we will have to think differently about some of these things. But they punished you with one of the harshest punishments, and we're not going to let that stand. So can you just take a minute and tell about the punishment? And there's going to be some links in here because we need to make sure that every single one of us support you because you're not just fighting for Tennesseans, you're fighting for all of us.
Yeah. So I knew that there would be consequences to my actions. I I knew that I was breaking decorum, and that was the point. If we're going to be out of order and illegal with this special session, then game on. Let's all break the rules then. And so, but I was careful I didn't break any laws. And and so this I knew there would be retribution because that is always how white supremacy acts. I saw it in with the Tennessee Three, right? And so I knew there was something coming. I just didn't know what it was. And so on Wednesday, I got a letter from Speaker McNally, Lieutenant Governor, stating that I am being stripped of my committee assignment. I am being stripped of my legislative pay and my per diem to be able to attend legislative conferences when we're not in session. And any legislative work, I cannot claim a per diem. So essentially, what that means is they have prohibited my ability to show up for my constituents for the rest of the year, and I won't be paid for it. Now, we do get a base salary, but people need to understand we are part-time legislators who receive part-time pay, but this is a full-time job. I get paid $28,000 a year for this job, but this is one of my only jobs, and so I depend on that income. And so they knew what they were doing by trying to punish me financially to make it hurt, to make it sting. And that's exactly, again, straight out of the white supremacy playbook. They will try to come for your livelihood. And so, yes, I'm not going to be ashamed to say I do need support. This fight is not over. I need to be able to communicate to my constituents, to the rest of the country, to amplify this fight in Tennessee, but also take the fight to their districts. I'm an organizer, so I'm not sitting on my laurels letting it slide. And so every dollar donated to my campaign will ensure tenfold that it will go back into making sure that people get to the polls. And so they overplayed their hand, let me just say, because what they don't know is that if they're going to try to prohibit me from attending legislative conferences and traveling and doing my legislative work, then I got time to be a problem for the Republicans now until November. So again, every dollar will be used to organize in Tennessee to make sure that we can not only get people to the polls, but support progressive candidates across the state in flippable districts. So you can go to my website to donate, but also I work in coalition with several different groups across the state that are part of the resistance. And so I know where to funnel resources, and we need your dollars in Tennessee. If you're watching this from across the country, again, you can support the fight by funding the fighters here, like myself, like Representative Justin Pearson.
We will definitely do that. And we will stay in community and communication with you because there is so much we can learn from you. We are doing our damnedest right here in this fight. But just imagine the power when we all come together and learn from each other and figure out the kinds of things that we can do. I cannot thank you enough for taking your time to come and talk with us today. It has been powerful. It's been transformative for me and what I think we all have to do. And I gather to say that for the folks on this call today, it's been that for them. So we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And we'll tell Chris. Chris Matthews, again, at the top of the show, and I talked about Chris. She was thrilled to know that you're coming on. And I sent the note she sent me, which said, what you did that day is you gave so much other people the courage and the steel in their spine they needed. And just wanted, we just found out when you're in the green room that they actually punished you more. We had no clue that was continuing. But for us, and what we talk about, these MAGA personalities and white supremacists, they don't stop. And we can't play nice, and we have to be ruthless in our thinking and our strategy, because they don't stop. And they could have stopped, but they're going to punish you. And this is something that is so, like you said, in the plague book. So thank you for being here. And we'll stay in community if you want to stick around. And Sam Rasoul, our delegate, is coming up. I don't know if you've ever met, but I'm sure if you stick around a little bit in the green room, maybe you guys will, in the after chat, if you can stick around, maybe you will get to meet, because he's also a justice fighter. So thank you, Charlane.
Thank you, Charlane. Senator Charlane.
Woo! I am so excited. Oh, here we go. For now, that was emotional, awesomely done, in the sense of bringing what to the table in a way to our friends in this room, and then people that will watch this later, where the fight is. And I see Bob Basic here, a fighter that was on the bridge, protesting that arch being built. We have people everywhere with the steel in their spine, and it gives us the hope we need to continue, because it is something. So with that, I am so thrilled to bring up our Virginia delegate, Sam Rasoul. So good to see you. It's been just a little bit. I've seen it not that long ago, but talk about somebody that is beloved to the grassroots in so many ways, and somebody that I met that it was always fighting for justice. And you taught us that you can have equality for some and not equality for other, that if you're fighting for it, it has to mean that it's for everybody. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. It's great to be with you all today. And of course, the wonderful staying power you all have all these years getting it done.
Getting it done. Yeah. It really feels like it. And really the friends we've made, when we talk about people-powered campaigns, again, that's something else. When we talk about the leadership skills you've taught people on the grassroots, the fight for the pipeline in Virginia, like the fight against it, all these things, that how people have to show up together. So in that spirit, there was some reason I wanted to bring you on for a couple of reasons. One, because a lot of times with the truth, love, and grit and all that you bring to the table on that, and as you know, what we've been doing, working every day these last 10 years, and for the Yes campaign, and then watching some things at the General Assembly that we really are trying to understand and digest, because then it starts to just pull the coalition a little bit. Can you talk to that, like about one, kind of what's going on to help us understand it, two, what we can or how we should sort of view it as activists and respond? Because like you always said, elected aren't really our friends. They carry our hope in a vehicle for that policy. But I think people have so many questions. And so if you want to sort of take them as they come to you, I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, certainly. Look, here's the story of my friend who's been a strong Democrat. He talks about how he was at the 1968 Democratic Convention, how he's worked in Democratic politics all these years. And then the 2016 presidential election happened, and he wrote me a long letter. And in his letter, he was making the case for me to leave the Democratic Party. He said, you need to be an independent. The Democratic Party has failed to connect. How could we have a message that was so difficult for folks, that you had the most qualified person ever to run in history running, versus this individual who was clearly not a good person. And if we couldn't, an awful person, if we couldn't connect with folks with that dichotomy, then like, what are we doing, right? And he's like, look, the Democratic Party. And I told him when we talked later, is I said, the reality is there aren't two parties in this country, and there isn't a Democratic Party. It's a coalition of factions, and these factions have different thoughts, have different ideals. When you have a country that's nearly 350 million people, you can't put them into two buckets. And so when we have conversations, there's really two sets of conversations, and they both should be well respected. One conversation during the primary, where we talk within our party, but between factions, and we're debating a lot of different ideas. And then going into the general is when we're going kind of head on. And I think that that's important context to kind of keep in mind. So,
Right.
look, anybody that's feeding you like vote blue no matter who and Democrats, obviously that's all BS, right? Like
Right.
everybody needs to be held accountable, including me.
Right.
But this is when we have those conversations in those primaries, and then there's a general conversation.
No, I think that's true when we try to, even when Fennell and I and the group and the teams and the coalitions tried about talking to voters. But, we did in 2025 have such a big win. And, you feel like I think it's really hard when we talk about governing, when we all have all the power. And we've talked about this, how the different kind of ways you take back power, different ways that you keep power, and the way that you can govern with that. So you also, people don't think of it, the governing body is like a coalition of different voices, right? You have the senators, the delegates, you have the governor's mansion, you have the lobbyists, you have the special interests, you have all these groups. And then you get to lawmaking and expectations and all that. And then, so out of that stuff, I think people have expectations that
Mhm.
we're going to get certain things passed. So when we saw some of the recent vetoes, and what's going on with that, people, the disheartened, and people are mad. And so what would you tell people about that? Because I'm curious, because we're hoping that some things can get done. Sometimes I think a lot of stuff is just leadership style communication. I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm just saying it's so important how we decide to build. I'm thinking this morning, there was a politician on talking about that really politics is all, Clyburn in South Carolina. It's all relationship building.
Mhm.
And that is key, right? So what is to give us, from our perspective, what we do, viewing all this, how we should digest it.
The reality is that there's a left and a right, but then there's a top and a bottom.
Right.
And in Virginia, because we're one of the few states that has unlimited contribution limits,
Yeah.
there are powerful special interests who, unfortunately, are very involved in a lot of these conversations. And so we
And that's
can't.
nothing new, right? You told us a long time ago that about Virginia. So I don't want people to think this is a new thing for this particular administration or anything. This is just the reality in Virginia.
It is. But now we have more and more money. I mean, we spent just in the House races well over $30 million,
A lot of
which was
money.
a record amount of money. I think the previous record was closer to 20, which was two
That's a
years
lot.
ago.
Yeah.
So the reality is we have to do more to make sure that the voices of everyday people are elevated, and
Right.
that can be tough in this environment. And I want to push back on folks who like they'll look at the Mamdani race in New York and look, some of the things he was pushing were purely populist, and we have
Right.
to understand that if we're not meeting people where they're at, we're in trouble. We have people, we're losing people in rural area and in urban areas.
Right.
And the only reason why we're making gains since November 2024 is because people are so freaking scared. They're seeing the craziness that is happening.
Right.
But
Right.
Catherine, it's Groundhog's Day. We're in the same exact position we were in 8 or 9 years ago. We cannot sit here and accept the same thing.
Yeah, you're right. So let's talk about some great things that you're excited about for your own stuff in your own lane for education and what your passion around kids and well-being. Give a few things on that, and then I wanted to also. A lot of people are looking at the data center stuff and the Dominion merger. I don't really understand that, and I didn't have time to dive any, but there's stuff going on there, and a lot of people. The biggest issue I think we're facing is the idea about the data centers and the climate around it and the well, how we live, how it's going to impact human beings, but also the longer term where AI is going to be used to kind of control people, maybe even currency. So there's a lot going on in that layer that I just said to you. But let's start with some of your education stuff that you're proud of, or some of that legislation, and then also some of our challenges with this data center and this kind of economic budget stuff you guys are heading into.
Well, let's do rapid fire and solve all the world's problems in just a
Yeah,
few
please
seconds.
go.
But you covered a lot of ground. Number one, AI is a major issue, probably one of the top issues or the top issue in education. This is the first generation in recorded history where the Students are performing lower than the generation before them. In other words,
Right.
every generation has been smarter than the previous generation, except for now. That's AI and technology. Number two, you had mentioned the data centers. The data centers are going to triple the amount of energy consumption in
Hmm.
Virginia by the year 2040. We don't have a plan for that. We can't do it. The only way to maybe do that is for us as consumers to pay for infrastructure to utilize the energy that they're going to need, not to mention the water. Number three, the Dominion merger. This company that wants to buy Dominion, this would be the biggest one in history. There have been Republican and Democratic states that have rejected this bad puppy.
Right.
They know that this is bad news for consumers. It's bad news for Virginia, and so we have to push back against this no matter what. And as far as education, chairing the education committee, what I'm seeing is that the social emotional health. I was just in an elementary school, so I was rushing on over. These fourth and fifth graders that I'm seeing today are not the same as fourth and fifth graders 6 or 8 years ago. We have to be doing more to invest in these children early, especially in their social and emotional development from an early age.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I know that one thing I wanted to end with, and it is about the Women's Summit this year, August 21st to 23rd, and you have been just a great champion of our work. So we'll talk about that later. But I wanted to just ask you off the cuff, what's your favorite moment or best moment you could think about at the Women's Summit? And then this really, we're trying to get people interested in attending, but best moment off the top of your head. Could be at the food
Oh,
truck.
yeah, it's by far just the ambiance. I mean, it is a party. The whole weekend is one big party, but what's really important are the connections and the friendships and
Yeah,
people from all around the state.
right.
And I just love it that you all have stuck with it all these years
Oh,
and having such good quality programming. I go to see all my friends to make the critical connections. But because look, if you all, I hope people are still awake and with us. If you all care about policy, all right, especially you liberals like to use something called liberal logic and information. That has not almost nothing to do with changing policy. 95% of better policy is better organizing, right? So if you want to get into an organizing space, the Women's Summit is one of the top spaces in all of Virginia to say, I am pissed off, I'm upset with this policy, with what's going
yeah.
on, and I'm going to be a community organizer. That's how we turn the table here.
Well, that's one thing when, your programming teaching us a lot about leadership, the kind of 3 hour stuff we did back in the day was one of my favorite moments. My favorite memory of the Women's Summit with you was in 2018 when we were fighting the pipeline and you brought Red, the women and the women that were in the trees. Do you remember that
Mhm.
moment?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Red Terry.
Red,
She
Hermina.
came, she was in there for 31 days protesting the
Yes,
stealing of her land by private entities, and Democrats were helping to facilitate that.
yes.
And so that's why we got to hold everyone accountable along the way.
Yeah, I was thinking about her just in general. Do you know how their land is, anything about that ever 10 years later, what's happened?
Yeah, they've taken most of the land. It's a little bit
Okay.
rough. I see her every few months. She's still fighting the good fight and telling the story. There have been a few movies that have come out.
Oh,
Um,
good. Yeah.
but while they may have lost some of the battles as far as winning the war, we always said three things: never going to have a statewide Democrat run pro pipeline. Number two, make sure that it becomes more and more difficult for any of these pipelines to even think about coming through Virginia.
Right.
And number three, if we can't beat them, it's going to cost a whole lot more. They're going to feel it, and the cost ended up tripling by the time they finished their project.
Yeah. Well, this is where other states like having Tennessee here and North Carolina, that pipeline goes across different places. So everybody fighting it helps. Well, Sam Rasoul, Delegate, thank you for being here. If you can stick around, please do. And we're excited. We're going to bring up next Jen Morrow from Bards Bookstore. And folks, if you're in the room, get your coffee reheated because we're going to go over a little bit today because we just having ourselves a great show. And I wanted to let guests make sure it's such an emotional kind of day, and it feels good to just let people talk. What do you think? And so Jen Morrow, owner of Bard's Alley Bookstore, and also been with us for many, many years at the Women's Summit. And
Yeah.
we wanted to have you on one just to talk about you and how you came to opening the bookstore and woman-owned bookstore, and in that space, what's happening for bookstores today, just in general, when we talk about reading and education and freedom to read and what we want to read.
Well, I'm flattered that you asked me to be here today because this is such a powerful group of supporters. And yeah, it's been since almost the very beginning. And so it's been a pleasure to be at the summit, and provide sort of a place for people to have a voice. And I opened in 2017, and I really kind of, as some of our speakers have said, you know, I I longed for that place to take my own children, where they could read and be exposed. When my son, learned how to read, I was in awe of the process. And, I looked around and I said, why don't we have something like this in my community? And, I just put in the work, and what was sort of a hobby became the bookstore. And so, it was really a passion project, from that perspective. I do have that entrepreneurial enthusiasm. Not everybody's born to do it. But, in my own way, I was able to, create this space and just kind of, so going to talk a little bit about that. Especially in times like these, we're a safe haven. It's not just me, it's all of the
Great
indies.
point.
You
Mhm.
know, um, some bookstores were a place where people went, ICE in their community, they would advertise, come to the bookstore. We'll be your safe haven.
Wow.
um, in the world of book banning, especially, certain states, even in our own state, we're a voice. We are, that's a platform where indie bookstores, can make a statement about how, it is just terrible for our children and our society. When you look at maybe a little bit on the lighter side, again, I use the word voice.
Right.
We sell stickers and t-shirts and pins, like activism can be in very different ways. It can be as subtle as putting some stickers on your water bottle, or your computer. It's your brand, it's it's a way to authentically kind of put a statement out there about your beliefs and kind of, call it like the senator was saying and the delegate, like calling people out, like making that public statement, but with a little bit of whimsy. So we do like to have,
It,
some, put in a
it
little
is.
bit of
I've
whimsy.
been in your store, so
Yes.
I think what you're saying too, and I think about libraries like, bookstores, even remember back in the day, record stores when you could
Mhm.
wander in and sort of lose yourself in the racks and see and then CDs, but albums were always great. Books are the same way, you kind of come in, like you said, the safe space where, I remember even going to the library where my mom would take me every week. But that kind of stuff to have that, I'm so
Hmm.
glad when we saw some bookstores closing that it was worrisome, or libraries under attack, and then we had the book banning. So you are so right about being that resource. And then how, in the sense of curating some of those voices, I want to talk about some of the authors you've had, and then some of the authors. What I love about the summit, we've been able to sort of coordinate with you about getting the books that we have on, the authors on, and then you also curate these voices for your bookstore. How does that
Hmm.
work for you, and what do you like to look for?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's a we're kind of hyper local is the term I like to use. So we have, because we really are deep in our community. So in Vienna, in the surrounding area, we know topics people are interested in. History. We have George Mason University close by. We have, people who are professors there who have written books. We
Right.
have, different library events we support. We kids authors. We have kid authors that we have in schools. I'm a member of Reading is Fundamental. I'm on the Emeritus board. And so we have a program where we bring authors into schools, and sometimes this is the first time they've met an author and they get a book, and these kids don't even have a book in their home.
Wow.
It's like the first time they've owned a book. And so, these are some things sort of adjacent to running the bookstore, that I really want to be involved in just to
I
provide,
love that.
that exposure. And
Well, when Delegate Rasoul said that about the AI, that's one thing I read that they're starting to find when computers started to come in schools, people's intelligence started to go down. When you go into the bookstore, touching it, feeling it, reading it,
Mhm.
the way we could disconnect from these phones and these sort of
Yeah.
creatures that are telling you stuff on a phone or a computer, that it's interesting how it's lowering IQ, not the gaining it, all this technology. So sometimes the simple fact of reading a book, right?
hmm Absolutely. And I read the term recently our youth are going through a loneliness epidemic,
Right,
because they are so centered on, a device.
right.
They've lost that social connection. And fortunately, because I'm in the bookstore, I see readers, we have enthusiastic, parents and grandparents, but it really is that outreach that we need to do to make sure, that in our schools and in, homes, that
Right.
children are finding that way to connect, and
It's
more
reading.
importantly, see themselves in the characters, LGBTQ,
Right.
BIPOC, like really making sure my tagline is choose your own story.
Oh,
And that
yeah.
really, yes, because we do not want to have, limits on what you
Right.
can read, or what people are writing about. And so I've learned a lot in the past 10 years, and I think it's helped me grow. And I just appreciate being surrounded by people like you.
Yeah, well, same here. I think books are so important. And just real quick, for a bookstore, when you say about book bans, do you feel like you can carry anything, or is this basically still you have that freedom, or because you're just a private business, but it's public libraries and schools that are more censored?
Yeah, that's true. That's
We
absolutely
just
the way
want to
to
make
say it.
sure that we're
Yeah,
still
I mean,
okay.
some people have tried to push the limits,
Yeah,
but I'm part of in a national association, American Booksellers Association, and
right.
they are in the fight very much
Yeah.
to
So
support
important.
diversity and, these types of issues.
Especially when you say seeing yourself in books, and that's so important. And we see what they're targeting in schools, taking up, stories like you said of LGBTQ or Black and Brown stories, authors. So the targeting is real. So it's so important you exist. My last question, then we will wrap it up, is favorite memory of the summit. Do you got a
Oh my
favorite
gosh.
memory? A good
There's
sandwich?
so many. I think I'm a big fan of music, and so anytime you have like the drums or the
Yeah, the
singing,
drummers.
it like just brings tear. I just think expressing yourself in, anytime you have anything, through the music, those are my favorite
That's
memories.
awesome. Well, mine was we were at the Capitol Hall in 24 when Rachel Bidikofer set up her book signing thing right outside where you were
Oh,
selling. Oh
mm-hmm.
my God, the lineup,
The
and
line.
we just enjoyed that too. And she's coming back this for this particular our event in August 21st. So we'll talk to you about curating all that fun stuff. But thank you, Jen Morrow, business owner, amazing badass. And you have a badass book club, people. You can join that. Go
We do,
online.
yes.
Yes. Support
Yes.
Jen, get a book.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, friend. Thank you. Thank you. All right, folks. So I've just I feel like I calmed down.
Yeah, I feel like I calmed down too. I don't know that I've ever had an interview that I
That was
felt so
something else.
emotionally tied to than to hear Senator Charlane Oliver and how powerful it is. And
Yes, it is.
it's just we have work to do,
Yeah,
and we can do it. We can do it. We can do this.
we
We can
can
do
do this.
hard stuff. We
That
can do
stuff
hard
about
stuff.
hope rooted in action, it really is true. Then to have Delegate Rasoul on, that really, that truth, love, and grit, that guidance that he talks about, and I have a bracelet somewhere near here because when he ran for lieutenant governor, they had the truth, love, and grit. So if you keep those centered things, and I like what Charlane said about letting them not take her soul. And we talked about that last week and all week, that I'll be damned no matter what, we can't let people take our light in this fight. So we are standing side by side. That's how we're stronger together. We definitely work ahead and every day. And Jen Morrow with the bookstore, these places that give us this joy we can walk into and just let our minds wander. And we talk about protecting that light. Doing more of that is important too. So
Yeah, and I wanted to say you were asking about important moments at the summit, and I don't know that I have one, but what I will say is that today is an example of the kinds of things that we're thinking about for this summit. And
yeah,
so, for example, with Senator Oliver standing on the tabletop, what can I do? But it's unexpected and it is viral. If you don't know anything about Senator Charlane Oliver, you know about the woman who stood on top of the table to fight for voting rights. And that is the unexpected. And that is one of the things we will be talking about at the summit is the power of
yeah,
the unexpected. And I think that's critical. And I think when Sam was talking about all of the things that, that we're being faced with today, the crisis that we find ourselves in, and that will be another thing we'll talk about. Never let a crisis go to waste. And so, how do we find our way out when things are happening? So, I think we just got some very exciting things for people
yes.
to be prepared for in this fight ahead.
Yes, I am all about that. Okay, so we did pretty good. It's only 104. That's great. But I wanted again, like you said, that interview was, I think, emotional for all of us. I mean, the real pain that it takes when you do have courage and you do have, that you take this risk, it comes with stuff that's hard to carry and it's emotive. And so when we, in history, even when you look back at when people did stuff and they're kind of shocked at what even happens afterwards. That's why, again, we do need to document it, figure out in the space how to really stay together. So by supporting her, we didn't know that they went after her like that. So I'm so grateful for people who donated to her today in any way, in any amounts. That's awesome. I also know that we wanted to put Royal Ground Game's link in there too. If you want to support Royal Ground Game today for a couple bucks, please put some stuff in their coffers and buy a Women's Summit ticket. Thank you for just that. Buy a scholarship ticket. So I want to thank everybody in the upper team up there that helped every week or make this show happen. Thank you so much. And for our patrons that support our show, if you love today and you know that this is what we do 7 days a week, please become a patron. It really makes sure that we have what we need to pay our bills. We really appreciate you. And follow us on Sunday on our Sunday sit downs at 7 p.m. We're going to have some good guests, maybe that Christopher Armitage, he wanted to come on the Sunday sit down. So you never know. You never know. So thanks. Let's go ahead and roll to the after chat.